Breaking news, chat! Phainon, Silverwolf, Hysilens, Castorice, Ashveil, Firefly, and Blade are going to be in this free limited 5-star selector coming out in a Honkai God Real. This might shock you because it is not real, guys. Gotcha. Unfortunately, as much as we like this to be a real phenomenon, the truth is, this is a purely hypothetical situation. This is a theoretical question that I kind of just put out of my ass one fine day and I posted it to Twitter. But little did I know, this got more than 1 million views within like 3 days, which is absolutely absurd on how many people were like talking about this particular selector. As a matter of fact, I believe your streamer was low-key trending because of this particular image in the entirety of HSR, right? Wait, let me try to find the little topic right here. Okay, so basically there was this little day, there we go, right? Honkai Star Rail players pick from free 5-star selector. The event offers choices from blah 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 as a thank you for player support, right? Community picks vary by team needs. Mortenax Blade shines for versatile fire and agility debuffs. Firefly powers break damage setups, and Hysilens 8's DOT strategies. Players share advice on matching selections to roster gaps and playstyles, with guides emphasizing personal fit over top rankings. And it is all because of your streamer. It is literally all because of your streamer. But just to clarify this, in case you have been led to any misinformation, this is not a real selector, right? This is not a real selector, right? If you are coming here thinking that's a real selector, I will see you in a separate video. But I do wonder, as a relatively interesting team building exercise, because while this is not a real thing that you can get for free, it does go into the mindset of how players in Honkai Star Rail pick their teammates in this ever-expanding game of power creep, HP inflation, flagships, main push, and everything in between, right? So I figured this video, you can kind of just use this as your background. As a matter of fact, pretend this is a podcast, like I'm talking to myself, as I just go through every single one of these options for the next 7 selections. And maybe you can just use this to tuck yourself to sleep at a very, very nice little relaxing background noise, right? Iru, slap on like 1 hour of background footage. Okay, I'm not sure how long I'm gonna yap, but I'm just gonna start yapping. I'm gonna yap like I have never yapped before, right? As I was saying, I think the general rule for the very first thing that you should consider is that I'm pretty sure most players, if they are gonna be coming across an option like this, they will choose the free Mortenax Blade, assuming they do not have a single one of these characters. Because Mortenax Blade is the universal support. You can be using him in pretty much almost every single team. You can use him with Castorice. You can literally use him with Phainon, right? You can use him with like Ashveil. People have been running bro sustainers on like almost the entire roster of Honkai Star Rail. And I personally think Sobin might be coming quite close to that department. A guide for Sobin is going to be releasing tomorrow as of the time of this video, right? But one thing that I find quite interesting is people take this as a choice, but it is purely based on a E0 baseline. So say if you do not have any one of these characters, I'm saying like you have completely 0, right? None of these characters at all, then I would say Mortenax Blade is gonna be one of, if not the best choice to have, especially if you are gonna be a brand new free-to-play player, right? So I also said it in my quick little summary right here, right? If you're a brand new free-to-play that just started in Honkai God Real, and if that way presents you with this option, objectively speaking, picking Mortenax Blade here is gonna be the best choice, namely just because for all of the other choices in this list, they are all DPSs, right? Okay, I guess Ashveil can be considered a sub DPS, but they're all generally DPSs that would require you to build a team around said DPS. Phainon needs his E2, Silver Wolf needs an E2, Hysilens wants to play DOT, Castorice has Mimo Slop, Ashveil, I mean, you technically use both M Blade, so it is what it is, and then Firefly, I don't think it needs any introduction, right? So, because if you're gonna be a new player in a position where you have none of these units, then picking up its support will be the most natural choice because you don't need to build a team around M-Blade. M-Blade is the member that helps you build the team that you want. So in the future, if you want to pull for any of the DPSs coming out, right, maybe you are going to be going for like Pearl. I mean, Pearl is a, I'm not sure if Pearl is going to be a TS. I don't think so. Maybe you want to play Wave Entry, right? Because Wave Entry has been shown to be a follow-up attack DPS come elation DPS 2-in-1. So if you do want to go for that route, like for example, if I'm a free-to-play player today and I just started HSR today, I could have the option of either using my M-Blade with Nemeko or using my M-Blade with Wave Entry, depending on which one you want, right? You don't build a team around M-Blade. You use M-Blade to help you build your team. But with that being said, the rest of the options are not always a no value, zero purpose, like a summer end kind of thing. Because if you are someone that has been playing HSR for a while, chances are you probably has some kind of investment for these units. And I kind of forgot to mention this at the very start of this video. This is purely from a meta, cost efficiency, and zero waifu / husbando bias suggestion, right? So if you like any of these characters, because Firefly is your girlfriend, Phainon is your husband, whatever it's gonna be, then please pick them, because gacha games are meant to be enjoyed and they are not meant to chase zero cycles, right? So with that being said, if you are a player that has been playing for a while, you probably will have one of the team comps right here, unless you, for example, played Acheron and Phainon in version 2. And then you skipped everybody in version 3 and then you put for D-Herda. Right, you put D-Herda in version 3. Thinking D-Herda is going to last you the entirety of version 3. And then you also don't want to play Elation Slot. So for like these kind of players that literally skipped every single one of these like quote-unquote flagship DPS options for the past 2 years, then M-Blade is still going to be the good choice for you, right? Because the purpose of M-Blade is to bring up all of these different teams HSR, because he has a support with a version 4 buff multipliers, with his defense down, vulnerability, personal damage, etc, right? But if you're someone else that has been playing any of the teams right here, then they are free copy, right? Assuming this free copy is gonna be an option for you. As a matter of fact, you might even be considering, should you even continue upgrading your teams from the listed ones here? Like, should you stick with your Phainon, right? Should you give up on Silver Wolf? Is DOT homeless? How strong is Mimo Slop nowadays? So I think that is gonna be the much more interesting topic of discussion, which is why I wanted to make this video for you guys today, because I think I'm not really sure. I mean, my chat, they are like, I feel like my chat, they are just saying things for the sake of saying things. But for 99% of HSR player base, you probably play one of these teams here, right? Like if I were to throw a pebble, right, in a group of 10, 9 of those buckles that pebble land is going to be playing one of the DPS shown on this screen, either the Break flagship, Mimo Slot flagship, or the Elation flagship. And if you don't play the flagship, there's the alternative path to the flagship, like for example, your Phainon, your DOT, or in this case, it's going to be your Ashveil, right? So I'm just going to go in with the assumption that you are watching this video since you are probably playing one of these DPSs, and you're not really sure whether or not you should be committing more copies, and is something that you want to stick with all the way towards, I would say, version 5, since version 5 is going to be coming very soon, right? So let's just first start off with Mr. Phainon Caslana, right? Should you continue on sticking, right? Choosing Phainon Caslana for your current option? I'm just gonna be very blunt. If you are playing E0 Phainon right now, the only thing on your mind should be an E2 Phainon. It is genuinely the strongest upgrade. In fact, I don't think any other DPS in HSR has a similar level of cost investment upgrade from their personal Hysilens compared to Phainon. And I don't even think Nimeko is at that point, because while Nimeko's E2 is also insanely good, her E0 at this moment is not as homeless as an E0 Phainon for now. But in the future, maybe in version 5, Nimeko's E0 is also gonna become homeless because of like power creep. Then Nimeko's Hysilen cost investment is also gonna be following a very similar roadmap, right? So for Phainon, right, if you are an E2 Phainon, right, you chose Phainon, you want to keep using Phainon, this is where my personal thoughts are gonna strictly be personal, right? I feel the way that Phainon is structured in HSR is that he is someone that can make use of raw damage multipliers way more efficiently than any other DPS. Because realistically, for your Phainon gameplay, there are only two things you need to keep in mind. Number one is, how do you get to your stacks as fast as possible and you edit it out? That's it, right? Then number two is, do you press E or do you press W? You only have two options in the entire fight. And generally, the options are also very intuitive. Like maybe you have like more than 3 targets, right? 3 or more targets. You always press W for the taunt as well as the stacks. Maybe some niche situations you might be using taunt for like a single target. Like for example, pulling up the action value of the bosses so you can clear at a faster pace because you want to intentionally make them change their attacks. That could be a way. But for Phainon mains, the key gameplay that is up to your player decision is only choosing where do you E or W. So he needs to have a ridiculous amount of buff multipliers. That is the only thing that can make your Phainon stronger, which is how many percent of attack, damage percent, defense down, vulnerability, rest pen are you able to deal within your ultimate form if you're not using Cyrene. And if you are using Cyrene, you don't really have to worry about it, right? So for Phainon, I really personally enjoy playing bro with my E2 Cyrene, and soon to be, when Sorbin comes out in the future, that is an extremely strong team. In fact, I personally feel that is probably one of, if not the strongest Phainon team right now, which is E2 Phainon, E2 Cyrene, Saridra, as well as Sorbin. Because for this group of 4 people, every single member in that team has really good Hysilens up until around E2. Saridra, you can stop at E1. But for both Cyrene and Sorbin, their best bang for buck is gonna be at the E2. But for Sorbin specifically, if you really want to whale all in and see one of like the craziest E6 in the entire game, you could even consider going for that option as well. But you will never need to do that for Phainon, because Phainon doesn't care about Sorbin's Hysilens. The only thing that really matters for Phainon anyways is just that one key item, which is E2. So for Phainon specifically, I feel like he is a unit that will scale pretty well up until around this caliber. Then maybe in the future version of version 5, they will introduce another character. So the version 5 version of, like for example, Blade or Sorbin, and then you can replace that current slot of Phainon to stick with the Cyrene, Saridra, Phainon combination, right? So that is what I essentially feel about, bro. Overall rating, if you are gonna be a Phainon main, I feel he can get a solid 8.5 out of 10. I'll give him a solid 8.5 out of 10, right? I personally do prefer his playstyle by quite a significant amount, right? Now, moving on into the next unit, right? Should you choose Silver Wolf 999? Should you choose Elation, right? This is probably one of the most confusing ways of pulls and roadmap that we have ever seen so far, at least compared to the previous flagship, like for example Break as well as Mimoslop, right? For version 4's flagship, that is gonna be Elation. They kind of want, I feel anyways, I feel they are kind of, they want to change the pace. They want to change the pace of the banners such that players don't always exactly know which unit is a clear pull value for their account. which is why I feel that's the reason they stopped the Elation Hysilens for so long. And they stopped technically the Elation Evernight for a decent amount of time as well. And they only gave us a generalist Elation support that is gonna be Yao Yao, which a lot of people back then fell into the agenda where Yao Guang is gonna get replaced by the Sirene and Sparksy is gonna stay, which is just very, very interesting if I can say so myself. So at this point of time, I feel if you are gonna be a Silver Wolf main, I think the roadmap has at least became clearer with version 4.6 because of Pearl. So if you can log in that Elation sustain slot and assuming you already pulled yourself the Yao Guang, I think Silver Wolf will have a very similar trajectory compared to, for example, the Mimo slot flagship, but it will still largely depend on the last two units being, I'm guessing, I'm feeling, Nihilux as well as Pro, and their islands. Right, because the reason why Mimo slot is so strong is because every single one of their vertical cost upgrades from 8 costs all the way to the 16 costs, they're all like so good, right? They're so synergistic. So it's very easy for consumers to identify, okay, I want to play Mimo slot, I'm going to throw E2, 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 and just basically beat everything in the game. I don't have to care about any other generated supports, right? Whether I want to get Sobin, that's like, it depends, right? But I've already committed myself for the 16 cost Mimo slot, then I wouldn't really think too much about it. So I think Elation will also follow a similar roadmap where assuming Nihilux and Pro also has like very strong items, because Yao Guang's E1 as well as the E2, they are pretty good. Right? And Silver Wolf's E2 is just obviously like super strong, which we can't even see the full potential every single time because we don't have enough punch lines for 240, but that will probably change with the upcoming releases of additional Elation units, right? So once that day comes, if you are going into God Rail with the intention of sticking with Elation teams, right, I would be prepared to vertically invest in this team as well. As a matter of fact, you should always vertically invest into any team HSR for a team that you want to play. Alright, I think that is the best way to manage your pools at the most cost-efficient purpose instead of pulling for like 7 different DPS and just leave them on 8 costs, right? It's just like, doesn't really work that way, especially as a free-to-play, right? So by version 5, I'm assuming you probably committed yourself to Elation. You would have gone the E2 Silver Wolf. Maybe E2 Nihilux will change everything. Alright, then start yourself with like a E0 Pearl or like a E1 Yao Guang. Then that should be a very strong team that will most likely see similar performances to Mimo slot, right? But there's one thing for Elation that is something that differs from Mimo slot is that the shielding environment for Elation is, I feel, is a little bit more restrictive, because it is purely reliant on enemies that gives you punchline generation or certified bangers. Alright? Whereas for Mimo slot, anytime you lose HP, you can gain those benefits because you only need HP scaling, right? You need healing, and or you just lose HP. But if in the future we get in a change of scenarios where there are gonna be a lack of Elation show environments, right? Imagine if they don't release the chicken, right? Or the Joyful Ascendant, or King Pom Pom for Silver Wolf mains, right? Or even like Ill Wish Arc Lotus. Like these kind of like super strong Elation shield bosses, if they stop appearing for version 5, I feel Elation might have a little bit of a similar trajectory with Break slot. Because Break, while generally they are pretty universal, they also have bosses that really counter break super hard. Like for example, you can't break the toughness bar, or like they just have super high toughness with a toughness bar inflation. So those factors will definitely make break stop a lot less versatile as well. So in the future, if they take away all of the aha stop mechanics, right, no more punchline. Like if you can't get any more free punchlines, and you're someone that did not vertically invest into Silver Wolf, right? Let's just say you're a Silver Wolf main, you left everyone at Elation at full E0 S1. I don't think you're going to be able to keep up, which has been the situation of what's happening to Mimo slot today, and I will talk about it in just a second, right? So overall score for being an Elation main, right? If you want to main Elation, I'm actually going to personally give this a 7 for now. I'm not going to give this a score as high as Phainon, because I don't know what Nihilux is doing, and I don't know what Pro is doing. But I know what Phainon is up to, so it's like a lot clearer for me as a consumer. So unless they see the full kit for Nihilux and Pro as an entire package, I can't really justify giving Elation that high of a score, because I don't want to get a Sparksy situation. Wait, where is my... I don't want to get a Sparksy situation happening again, right? So that is pretty much going to be that. Now, moving on into the third team of discussion, and that is to be a DOT main, right? If you're a DOT main, the big 2-6. DOT has been getting a surprising amount of slander. I think I haven't seen this much DOT slander compared to the past couple of months, especially when this Memory of Chaos as well as the previous endgame rotation drop. Because I think DOT is those teams, they're one of those teams that they will get one buff and then they will get nothing else for a huge period of time. Alright, we got one DOT in Black Swan, and then we got a Kafka, and then version 3 they gave a Hysilens, and that's it. And it looks like in version 4 there's like no DOT buffers inside, right? There are no other additional DOT units. They didn't even give a Jiao Qiu, right? Because it's just gonna be Elation, right? We're gonna be getting Sobin, we're gonna be getting Wave Entry, and then it's gonna be Pearl. So unless they release a DOT unit in like version 4, DOT would have went the entire V4 without a single upgrade, which I think is just, it's natural for DOT mains to feel the struggle, because it is like, as if, imagine if you're playing Phainon, but they didn't release Ashveil, bro, and Blade. Then obviously you're gonna struggle because you literally have no other upgrades from Phainon. Besides that, I'm not even sure if you can call Cypher a Phainon upgrade, but like it's really, really minimal. Okay, I guess without DHPT, right? At least you have DHPT. So for DOT mains, hang in there, right? Hang in there. I don't think they will ever abandon DOT, but it is just one of those teams that doesn't really get as much attention because they are either like side correctors or all the other main pushers are taking the budget as well as the marketing, right? So if you are gonna be a DOT main, I will give this rating a solid 6 out of 10, right? I'll give DOT mains a 6 out of 10 rating. So that is gonna be that. There's this one concern I have with DOT, which is, while DOT has some really good E1s, right? DOT's Black Swan E1, Hysilens E1, and Kafka E1, they are really good, but they don't really scale that well into beyond those E1s. So their item scaling, comparatively speaking, is a lot harder compared to Phainon, Elation, as well as Mimo Slop. And I feel that having good items in your kit, it is a must. It is a must to make sure that your team has any sense of longevity. It is not just having like E0 and just use E0 for the rest of life. No, right? Having items to stick in with future versions while having effective costs, right? That means you don't change for entire new team entirely. I think having good items are super important. And unfortunately, I don't think DOT really has like really, really good items, right? So that is pretty much gonna be that. Hey, now we can talk about Mimo Slop. I personally feel Mimo Slop is the most divisive team ever made in HSR. The most divisive. Because back when they first announced Castorice, there was a whole global passive incident. And that made like a shit ton of interesting moments, right, back in the Big 2-5. And then eventually, it was also one of the strongest package of flagship combined with incredible item investments combined with the shield buffs and bosses like Pollux. So if you are gonna be talking about a team like Mimo Slop, I feel it is a very divisive topic. You either hate Mimo Slop, they think they are like the most slop team in the entire HSR, or you simply love Mimo Slop because, oh my god, they're so easy to play, I can clear everything, and for the level of cost investment, they're just doing extremely well. So there are very rarely any in between when we are talking about a team like this. So personally speaking, I feel, okay, if you're a new player, there's no point, right? Because you miss out on anything, right? But I find it quite interesting how like in every single rerun of version 4, we have literally gotten ourselves a Mimo Slop rerun. Like if you kind of take a look over here, right? No. Since 3.7 all the way through to 4.5, we have gotten a member of the Mimo Slop rerunning without fail every single patch. So can you imagine if 4.6 they rerun Castorice? So I'm not really exactly sure why this is the case, but I feel the reason they are doing this is because they know Mimo Slop was a huge success in terms of performance. And a lot of people, especially casuals, they play Mimo Slop. So since the appeal for Mimo Slop is already there, having more reruns will naturally drive in the demand for Mimo Slop, right? Because if there are no one playing Mimo Slop, then they wouldn't rerun that banner anyways. Then because more players are playing Mimo Slop, they can then go for the E2s, right? They can go for the E1s, right? The E2 Evernight, Hysilens, and every single one of these items are just genuinely just really good as a whole, right? So I think this is by far the most black and white, right? If you love playing Mimo Slop, you are ready to invest for the cost, right? 16 cost, full E2 S1. This team's performance is just not questioned by any player base, right? Of course, we are not talking about this from like those zero cycle low cost clears, right? Because zero cycle and low cost, there are a lot of nuances mixed in. Like for example, your relics, right? Your speed tuning, right? How you actually play the fight, the amount of resets. But just as a general purpose team comp that is just like straight up, like, oh my god, it's just really good. I think, and I still feel Mimo Slop at this point of time is my 9.5 out of 10 team. The only catch for Mimo Slop is just it is a pretty expensive team to play, which is my downside for Mimo Slop. In the big 2-6, especially right now, right? If right now you're playing Mimo Slop, but you're still having a full E0 Mimo Slop team after 1 year, right? You did not make any vertical upgrades, any investments, then you are probably gonna be feeling the struggle because Mimo Slop really benefits a lot from those item upgrades. And I think the developers know that as well. Like they know how strong a Mimo Slop item is gonna be. So they built the difficulty of our endgame content scaling with these kind of items in mind. Because if the difficulty is not strong enough to warrant an upgrade on the Mimo Slop items, then nobody will really care about the Mimo Slop items, right? There's no point giving such insane E2s or E1s if there are no places to like actually use them in. So because of that, I feel the increasing inflation, right, the difficulty, right, the 20 million HP from my same order count stuff, all these, I feel indirectly, Mimo Slop has a role because they have just such crazy good items. And you as a player playing Mimo Slop, instead of pulling for more teammates, you pull for more items. So that is pretty much gonna be that. Overall rating, I give Mimo Slop 9 out of 10, right? Minus that 0.5 a little bit because it can be a little bit costly. But if you are a man with discipline, right? If you are really like locked in, you love playing Mimo Slop for the rest of lives, I think this is like one of the best ways to go, right? So that is gonna be that. And now we are gonna be moving on to Ashveil. Okay, Ashveil, I feel it is a very interesting unit. Because his release timing kind of reminds me of Boodale. Right? It is like right before the anniversary, right? It's like 4.1, and like just like people like didn't really pay too much attention to Ashveil. But nowadays, his performance has been getting really good, especially with the inclusion of M-Blade. And subsequently, we are going to be getting Wave Venturing, which we have seen from the live stream. They are literally a 3 team of men, and they can run DHPT for 4 team of men, right? If you were an Ashveil user, right, you want to use Ashveil, he does remind me a little bit of like Phainon. Like he is a follow-up attack main, and he has his own little follow-up attack gimmicks that is tied to follow-up attackers. You can use him with a Phainon main DPS, but I am almost 99% sure the moment Wave Venturing come out, that will be the brand new face of follow-up attack. It is going to be Wave Van, Ashveil, and Blade. Boom. Done, right? But if you do not like to play something like this, then I don't think there's any reason to force yourselves to play Ashveil as well, because the thing with these kind of like follow-up teams, right? Like for example, Face Up, it is very fun. It is very like fulfilling, right? You feel fun chasing those high number of frequency of attacks, but at the same time, you should also have a expectation where the marketing and budget for these teams will probably not be as high as compared to a main push flagship like Elation or Remembrance, which is why Phainon, right, like DOT, or even to a certain extent like Acheron, their attention is not gonna be as high as compared to that year's version. So the question for Ashveil is, how can he pivot into the next version despite the fact that you can kind of just see from his items, they are definitely not as impactful as compared to our flagship items, right? And if I feel like this has been a current team where the more popular a unit is, the better their items tend to get, right? Which is why Silver Wolf's good items is E2, and then Evan SL with like no budget is E1. Right, it is what it is. Then like for Phainon, right, I mean Phainon E2 is really good, but Savidra's additional items, right, E1 is kind of okay, but you could overcap on defense now, especially pull Sobin, right? But for Mimosop, everybody has like really good E2s. So in follow-up attacking teams, besides like for example, Phainon and M-Blade's E2, I would want to see how Ashveil himself can scale towards the version 5, because if his items are gonna be too sus or too bad, he might not have enough damage multipliers to survive for like a version 5 variation of a follow-up attacking sub DPS or main DPS, right? So that is gonna be Ashveil. I think overall I would give bro a 7 out of 10, right? Okay, second last unit, and that is going to be Firefly. I feel Firefly, if there is a single team that casuals want to use, it is either gonna be Mimoslop or it is gonna be Firefly. And I think Firefly's success was incredibly well received back in Panicony, right? Getting stabbed, right? The girlfriend experience, the amount of art, influence, right? Social media mark. Like Firefly is legitimately everywhere, right? With the Stellaron Hunters and everything. I feel if you main Firefly since day one, all the way till now, her performance has never really been like to the point of unplayable, right? She's not always tier 0, right? Nowadays she's doing relatively well, right? Especially with her Noah Flare as well as Dahlia, right? They even has few. And Dawei loves to give like dedicated break buffs and break enemies just to keep the Firefly fans happy, which there are a shit ton of Firefly fans, right? Now that being said, going forward in the future, right? I feel there's an interesting thing happening for Firefly, which is, if you notice our 3 characters here, they are Stellaron Hunters, right? M-Blade and Silver Wolf have got their SP forms. Firefly is still just chilling there, not doing nothing in her base form. Well, granted, she did get a Noah Flare, right? I feel just purely based on like popularity and the amount of like fan base that Firefly has, I feel if not a version 5, then definitely version 6. I feel Firefly will most probably get her own version of an SP as well. That's why they call this Honkai SP, right? Everyone and their moms eventually, by version 7, we'll just go to Amphorius SP, right? We'll just go to new Amphorius, and then every single Kratos here will have an SP. So we have Castorice SP, Firefly SP. They just rerun the entire Amphorius roster for new Amphorius, right? I think that could actually be a very, because at the end of the day, Amphorius is a super popular place. There's so many artists and merch for Amphorius, so that's gonna be that. But I'm kind of getting distracted. TLDR, Firefly mains, break mains. If you don't get any anti-break environments, you are completely pain chilling. If you want a 0 cycle, you kind of have to do it sustainless. There's not really another option. And they are kind of cursed with this really homeless sustain to the point where most break players just go sustainless because they can, right? You can build defensive main stats, you have the delay, you have HMC on DDD. Sobin theoretically could literally be used with Firefly. She's just that versatile. So overall rating for break, I will give this a very solid 8.5, right? So those are gonna be the 6 different DPS archetypes team comps that I would personally rate out of this roster over here. M-Blade, it is not really fair because, like I mentioned at the start, he is meant to fit into whatever your account has, and you don't build a team around M-Blade, so he doesn't really need a rating. So in summary for this entire video, right, This is not a selector, but I do think it is quite interesting to see what the HSR community is thinking about their choices of flagship or team building they are doing as of this moment, since we do have ourselves the 3-team endgame content. Who knows when will we get a 4-team endgame content by version 5, 6, 7 or whatever it's gonna be. And always remember, right? And I think this is like my #1 rule of pooling or like building a team around HSR. I never ever, or at least I feel, I would never try to pull a DPS for support. And I only pull a support for a DPS that I currently own. I feel like this is the best way to save yourself a lot of problems, because if you pull a DPS for support that you pre-pulled, you're not even sure if that said DPS is gonna be having another support that buffs the DPS. Because these things are called after sales. And generally speaking, DPS always has the most amount of budget in a gacha game. Alright? So if your support budget is the after sales, you are kind of flipping the role around to the point where maybe if you were to pull a DPS for current support, it might work. But what if that support gets another like stronger DPS going down the road? Right? It will become very confusing, and your account might not have a sense of direction on which team do you want to lock in, right? So with that, I'm going to end off this video. Who would you pick? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Once again, this is not a selector, but who would you pick to play, theoretically speaking, in Goryo, right? Join Discord. One update is my throat is getting fucking destroyed. And I'll see you guys tomorrow using code OB with 10% off. Thank you.